Hey, what's up, guys? It's Nick from Arch City Poker and Arch City PLO. And in today's video, we're going to take a look at a hand that I played recently in a 2-5 player pool. Pretty, I think, interesting spot that confuses a lot of players on the flop here. So we'll get right into the action. I'm under the gun with ace queen of clubs, decide to go ahead and raise. And this loose player in middle position decides to go ahead and call. I've played with him a few times. I don't really know a whole lot about him. He just seems like he's capable of at least getting out of line a little bit. But I think there's certain spots where he seems like he plays pretty straightforward. So it's kind of an unknown right now. But I know in general he's pretty loose. He's playing a lot of hands pre-flop. So we actually end up heads up on this flop. Ace 10 4 two-tone. I flop very well with ace queen with the nut flush draw. I think for all intents and purposes, this is going to be the best hand very, very often. As far as range advantage and polarity advantage, I have both of those. I think he would 3-bet ace ace, fair amount of his ace king, maybe even like some ace queen suited. I'm not sure with him yet, but the point is, I obviously have every single like nutty combo for the most part on this texture. He's only going to have some of them. So I do have the polarity advantage as far as having more nutty combos. Now, as far as range advantage is concerned, obviously if he's deprived of the nuts and if he's loose pre-flop and calling with a wider range, then he's just simply going to have more air, more weaker pairs. My range is going to be stronger. So with the range advantage and the polarity advantage, I think I should be betting. Now, the SPR is about 22, so we are very deep. I think with this particular hand, I would like to bet large more often than not. When I do have the polarity advantage, I can bet larger more often than my opponent can. And when I have the range advantage, I can just bet more often in general. So I think it's a hand that I'm pushing a lot of equity with. If he does have like an ace X type of hand, I'm going to get a lot of value out of him by starting to bet large. Now, on the flip side of that, because he is really loose, I think a really good way to exploit players like this is to bet smaller in spots like this when you have a huge range advantage. It puts a lot of pressure on combos like 5-4 suited, pocket fives, 10-7 suited. Like I think he's the kind of player that has some of that in his range. So, if I bet really large, I think it's going to be a little bit tougher to get those kinds of combos to continue. So if I want to keep certain parts of his range, and by certain parts I mean like the weaker parts in, then I feel like it does make sense to bet small here. Now, with this specific combo, I think I probably would want to bet larger more often than not still. But I do decide to go ahead and bet a little bit less than half pot. I think it was around 40% or so. And he decides to go ahead and raise. A little bit of a smaller raise, but he does raise to 40. So the way I interpret this raise sizing is that it's not very large. I think it's one of those things where like he's possibly trying to figure out where he's at in the hand with some kind of like ace X hand. I don't see players making this play with like Jack 10 suited. He might have some flush draws. They don't raise their gutters quite as often, so I don't see a whole lot of King Jack or King Queen here. There might be some in there, but I think this is sometimes flush draws and then mainly ace X hands, which I'm pretty much mostly beating. So it is an interesting spot where, I think a lot of players, they will think to themselves, well, I have the nut flush draw, I have top pair, second, kicker or whatever. Do I have like a strong enough hand to go ahead and re-raise him with? I mean, yeah, we have the nut flush draw, we have top pair, we have a very good hand. But what is a 3-bet going to accomplish in this spot? And I think that's the main thing you guys want to ask yourselves. Do you get ace jack to call? Do you get ace 9? Do you get ace 8 to call here? With a loose player, you might. And by loose, I mean he's more loose pre-flop than anything. But in this spot, even like some of those loose guys, they're going to realize that your 3-bet from out of position on an ace high texture as the pre-flop raiser, that's going to look incredibly strong. I think that they are going to perceive that as being pretty overly value heavy. Like there's not going to be a lot of bluffs in my range. So if that's the case, I think I'm actually folding out some ace X. I might only be getting action from like ace 10, ace 4. If he does have those, rarely, I think maybe some bottom set. But I would like to keep in the worst ace X hands. I would also like to keep in some of those maybe rarer flush draws that he's raising with. Because if I do 3-bet over top of him, does he continue with some of his flush draws? That's possibly the case, and if I had that info, that read, then I probably would just go ahead and 3-bet, trying to get him to put as much money in as possible right now. But because I think I might fold out too much of his range, I go ahead and just call. And with your flush draws in spots like this, I think the big thing too is like how much showdown value do you have, and how strong is your hand. My hand might be overly strong, or like strong enough to where you can definitely argue a 3-bet. I think I made a lot of good points as far as possibly implementing a 3-bet and why. But let's say I had like a little bit of a weaker ace X hand, like ace 7 of clubs. I think that hand has pretty good showdown value. I think even with the nut flush draw, it's a pretty good one just to throw into my calling range at this point versus his raise. If I had maybe like king, queen of clubs, that might not be a terrible one to attack him with if I do think I can get him to fold like some weaker ace X hands or even like some 10X hands. Because, when I do 3-bet here, balance doesn't matter as much in these player pools, but you do want some of these guys to realize that when you are 3-betting them in the spot that you can show up with non like 2 pairs plus or like ace king. You want to be able to have like some draws in there, essentially, some bluffs, obviously, to balance that out. But with this guy, I don't know if I need to worry about that as much. Having said all that, though, like I said, I wanted to keep him in the pot, so I decided to just call. And the turn's a 9 of spades, so I check. I think that's pretty standard. He decides to check back, so I think that's pretty telling. I don't think he would check back ace 10 or ace 4, bottom set. I think he'd probably bet ace king in that spot for the most part, too, if he did have that in his range. So I really do feel like this is some kind of weaker, like ace X hand that's now essentially trying to, implement some pot control. Maybe he's going to go for a second street of value if I check to him again on the river. But I think for the most part, he would bet his strong hands here and then probably bet most of his flush draws, I would say. So I think we have a pretty good idea of where we're at in this hand. And the deuce of spades on the river is not going to change a whole lot. I feel like it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to bet large. Now, if I do feel like he has a lot of ace X that is going to explosively call, then I think I could argue sizing up here. But I think it makes sense to go ahead and throw out half pot bet. I think it looks like I could be bluffing with this. I think it looks like I could be trying to maybe squeeze in a value bet. But I think this targets a lot of what I want to call. I think a lot of like his ace 5, ace 6, ace 7 is all going to call here. So he does in fact call, and he ended up flashing this card specifically. So obviously he had some kind of worse ace X hand, but yeah, I thought a pretty interesting spot where players get a little confused with what to do with their flush draws when they do face a raise on the flop. I really don't think he should be raising on this flop either. I think that's something else I wanted to point out, is that when you don't have the polarity advantage or the range advantage, you really shouldn't be attacking a texture that your opponent can have like all combos of the nuts on. At least you shouldn't be attacking it that often. Now, if I was like on the button and he was in the small blind or big blind or something, and I c-bet this flop, obviously I don't have as narrow of a range at that point. But when I'm under the gun and I c-bet and he decides to raise, I'm not really in love with that play. I think he should just be doing a lot of calling, planning to evaluate my turn action. A lot of players will very transparently check the turn if they don't have a lot of ace-x hands, and then you can go ahead and stab and take the pot from them. So pretty interesting hand overall, but like I said in that video before this, excited to be back, excited to get you guys some free no limit content. As I said before, pretty much in all of these videos, I am definitely going to try to promote the new PLO site. I applied to get some links on these videos for some reason. I haven't been on YouTube in a while. Obviously, they took that away, but you have to be some kind of like partner or some crap like that. So hopefully there'll be some links soon to where I don't have to keep promoting it, I guess, verbally, even though maybe I will. But that is going to be archcityplo.com. If you're looking to improve your PLO game, you play in live PLO settings, whether that's live low stakes, live mid stakes. The videos on there are going to be very short. They'll fit into your busy day. A lot of simplified strategies that will help you guys really improve your PLO game and get you guys more involved in that variant. So head over to the site, check that out. Email me if you have any questions. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next video.